It's the appointed time, and we have a quorum. I call the meeting to order. Let's invite the administration to come in first. This meeting will stop at 10:30 because the venue will be used by another meeting. If there are unanswered questions or if there are further questions, you will have to wait till next time. Since the last meeting, the Bills Committee has received a submission from the Hong Kong College of Pathologists. This has been forwarded to members. Matters arising from the last meeting, you'll find a list of follow-up actions from the discussion at the meeting on the 12th of December. The administration has given us their reply. Let's wait for the administration to be seated, and then I'll ask them to take us through their reply.
好，咁而家請阿方毅處長呢。
Mr. Fong. You may be aware of a case where the court has delivered judgment of a medical incident. It was a tragedy, and it has also caused public concern about quality and safety of private healthcare facilities and equipment. We don't want this tragedy to repeat, so we ask members to support the scrutiny of this bill so that we can introduce a new regulatory regime as soon as possible to enhance patient safety as well as consumer protection. On the fourth Bills Committee meeting on the 12th of December, members have asked a number of questions and made comments. We have furnished our response on paper. As per members' requests, we have provided detailed information about the healthcare establishments of the two universities, that is 14 existing facilities as well as a proposed exclusion. We had a very detailed discussion in the last meeting, so I'm not going to repeat the details. I would like to say, however, that when it comes to day procedure center, clinic or health services establishment managed by the two universities, if they are primarily used for teaching and research, they will be excluded from the bill. However, if these facilities are no longer used for teaching and research, we may ask the Hong Kong U or the CUHK to apply for a license. Second thing is in relation to the submission made by the Federation of Insurers. We had a meeting with them in January. We briefed them about the content of the bill and answered their questions. We have also responded to the comments made by the Federation. You'll find our response in Annex C. Questions from members. Mr. Siu Ka-fai, Chen Kim-po, and Dr. Pierre Chan. Anyone else? And Mr. Ray Chan, 4 minutes each.
Mr. Siu Ka-fai, thank you. Just now, the director was referring to the CR incident, and that we need to deal with this paper as soon as possible. I don't think anyone in Hong Kong would like to see an incident like that happening in Hong Kong. But I'd like to point out that, for beauty care and medical services, sometimes you cannot differentiate between the two. And even though even if we were to, endorse this paper, I don't see any direct relationship of this paper to the DR incident. In this paper, we understand that doctors will need to be stationed at these facilities. And the DR incident happened, and we saw in the incident that both the proprietor and a doctor was there. So it doesn't mean that even if there is no doctor, even if the doctor were present, nothing would go wrong. I mean, I'd just like to point out it may not be the case that even if doctors were present, the premises would be safe. Last time, some colleagues said that the paper was entirely about, beauty care, and I don't really agree. I would like our Legal Services Division and the Bureau to give us a definition of medical services. I understand that the Food and Health Bureau has circulated paper 03, which is a response to the question regarding medical procedure. We understand that at the moment there is no definition for medical procedure. So in the bill, you refer to other types of minor procedures like, the dressing of wounds and so on. These are just examples. But does that mean that they have all of them have nothing to do with beauty care? Could the Legal Service Division please also explain? Thank you. Our division has reviewed the full text of the bill, and we found that as far as the definition of private healthcare facility is concerned, an important concept is involved, namely medical procedure and medical service. In the bill, we notice that there is no definition of a medical procedure, but there are other related concepts like medical services, medical treatment, for which there are definitions. So this involves, I think as far as the definition is concerned, it involves certain people engaging in certain acts, and if such acts fall under the definition of medical procedure, and the premises in which the procedure were conducted will then fall within the definition of private healthcare facilities. It could be a hospital, it could be an ambulatory, medical procedure facility, and they would need to be licensed and abide by the licensing conditions. As for the definition of medical procedure, in Section 12 of the bill, there is an offense, namely that for medical practitioners who are not qualified and perform medical procedures in relevant premises, for example, licensed PHF, then it would be an offense. And because we've actually asked the government a question relating to this concept, and they've already given us a reply in the paper. So perhaps we can ask the administration to further elaborate on the reply. Mr. Fong, thank you. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that at the moment, the ordinance does not regulate the ambulatory medical clinics, and beauty service is a similar, facility. When the bill becomes law, such facilities will be subject to the regulation of the bill. It would be, higher than ordinary clinics, but then it's higher at a higher level than private clinics. So I like to emphasize that this can be done. And secondly, regarding the definition of medical procedure, in Annex 2, we have already listed the medical procedure that will be performed in ambulatory medical procedure facilities. We've actually asked medical experts to give us the views before we came up with a definition. For the medical procedures listed in Schedule 2, they can only perform in the ambulatory medical procedure facilities and private hospitals. So in respect of these definitions, definition of medical procedure, why is it that we've only listed what are medical procedures? But the list cannot be exhaustive because medical technology is advancing all the time and we simply cannot come up with an exhaustive list. That's why we're saying that for certain types of procedures, they should be incorporated in Schedule 2 and they can only be performed in the ambulatory facilities. Some could be directly done in private hospitals. Some could also be performed in clinics. But for the others, we will not provide for them by way of a schedule because technology is changing all the time. If need be, I can ask the Department of Health to help. Mr. Chen Kim-po, first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Fong and his team for talking to the Federation of Insurers and had an exchange of views and also addressing the concerns of the Federation. I think some of the issues have now been resolved, but I have two questions. We all know that the clinics now are very advanced. The so-called ambulatory facilities, the equipment would enable them to perform many procedures. But now in hospitals, the government is now requiring, price transparency and also, require the clinics and hospitals to provide budget estimates. And for procedures to be done in these ambulatory facilities and clinics, there are similar arrangements. The government wants to do this at the second stage. We want all members of the public to understand that wherever the procedure is done, they have the right to obtain a quotation first. Once they've obtained the quotation, all the insurance companies will be willing to tell the consumer whether or not the quotation is reasonable, so that we hope that the government will move on to stage 2, that is for the ambulatory facilities. They should require the medical facilities to provide a quotation well in advance so that we can protect consumer rights. We all know that the medical charges should be transparent, but they cannot be subject to regulation, as in the case of other fares and charges. But on the subject of transparency, one problem is that we've seen some unreasonable fees and charges. When that happens, we can only complain to the medical council, but very often there's nothing. It's difficult for us to really, prove our case. And so are there any channels for us to receive such complaints? You were saying that you now will accept complaints from patients and consumers. But would you consider also this, that is, there are many people who are abusing the medical system and the petitioners are charging an unreasonably high fee. If there's no insurance coverage, the fees will be much lower than those who have. If the discrepancy is very small, nobody would mind, but we have a very serious abuse resulting in insurance premium going up all the time, adding to the burden of the consumers. And actually the premium is increasing by more than 10% per annum. So it's putting a lot of pressure on the people who have taken up the insurance. So this is very important. So other than the medical council, what other channels are there to entertain complaints regarding fees? Thank you. When we consulted the public on the bill, we also consulted the stakeholders regarding the subject of fees and charges. As Mr. Chen said, we believe that regulating the fees directly may result in Well, given that the medical procedure may need to be changed, in the process, so we need to be very careful. We shouldn't, you know, prevent certain procedures to be performed when they should have been performed because of the price consideration. So we would now therefore propose that there should be a price list, whether it's the private hospitals or the ambulatory, facilities. They should show the consumers the fees and charges. For private hospitals, we would even require them to provide a budget estimate for the patients. And on a voluntary basis, we would require them to also put online onto the internet the historical, figures regarding charges and fees, so the public can have a better understanding. And when people can compare the prices, then there would be more competition. And this is what we want to do, because it would enable the patients to make comparison more easily. And by doing so, we want to rely on the market so that fair fees and charges could become more reasonable. And I think this is the more appropriate approach. We would monitor the development, of course. We're supposed to do this on a voluntary basis now. When the bill comes into force, the Department of Health will have the authority to require the regulated PHF to do that. We will monitor the implementation of this requirement to see whether we need to further fine-tune the arrangement. Dr. Pierre Chan, thank you. I'd like to go back to paper 02. In paragraph 4, the administration talks about academic freedom and institutional autonomy, which I fully support. But many tertiary institutions are now, based in HA premises, and you're offering them exemption. If for tertiary institutions, if they, operate in other premises and you exclude them, I understand. But these universities are using public resources. They are operating in premises which belong to the HA. So when they take care of the patients, which is more important, academic freedom or safety for the patients? It would appear that academic freedom and institutional autonomy seems to override patient safety. When you have such a scenario, I'd like to ask whether safety of patients should come first or what. And then I'd like to go to Annex A. You have a comparative table regarding how, complaints are handled. For the HA, and on the website of the HA and different hospitals, every week complaints are received. On the website of the HA and the hospitals, if you go through the search engine, you can easily find the address and telephone number of the officer who would take complaints, and also the place where complaints could be lodged, and so on. Okay, let me now ask the same question again. This is the third time perhaps I'm asking this question. For the 2-tier or 3-tier complaint handling mechanism, who is the contact person? Could you give us a paper to explain that? I don't know. I think this is the 11th or 12th time I'm asking the same question, and I'm not getting any answer still. Though in such a scenario, my question is, whom should the complaint be directed to? Who are these people? And should there be, if somebody want to pursue the complaint further, would there be a central, complaint handling mechanism? Annex B. Here we have a list of the percentage of that is how many percent of the facilities will be used for teaching and research. Now, is anyone monitoring this and vetting whether or not these numbers are in order. Who makes the judgment?
方毅處長。
Thank you, Mr. Fong. Of course, safety of patients is paramount. There is a mechanism under the two universities to ensure patient safety, so everything is in order. But it doesn't mean that we don't think patient safety is not important. The medical clinics ordinance exempts medical institutions under the two universities, so it's not something new. And this approach is even more stringent because we clearly state that these establishments will have to be primarily used for teaching and research. And as to how we decide whether they are for teaching and research, you see in the footnote that patients will have to sign consent form for the purpose of teaching and research. So when patients go to these clinics, centers, health services establishments, patients go there for this purpose. Of course, some patients may refuse to sign a consent form, but most patients will not do that. That is part of the procedure, so we will know. Should there be a day when we notice that that is not what is going on, that is, patients don't go there for the purpose of teaching and research, then the Department of Health has the power to revoke this exclusion. So the DOH will look at the actual situation. If they say that they are for such purpose, we will look into it. And should there be a day when it's no longer like that, we will ask them to apply for a license. So still, there is a monitoring mechanism. There are still conditions to be fulfilled. What hasn't been answered? The complaint telephone number. We will provide information in writing. I would like to say that this is the 10th or 11th time when they say that they will supply the information in written form. We have mentioned about the three-tier mechanism, but we have not put down the contact information because we were not aware that members actually were asking for that. It doesn't matter. Just give us the information on paper. Mr. Fong said that if they find that that is not for teaching and research purpose, then they would require these institutes to be regulated, so it's protected. Mr. Ray Chan, thank you. Last time we spent quite a lot of time to ask questions, because when it comes to institutions that are managed and controlled by the two universities, they will be excluded. I would like to ask about fees transparency. In Annex 1, it says that, well, if the facility is to charge, then details of the charges will be clearly explained and provided. So it's not clear. How is it explained? When is it explained? Section 63 states very clearly it's about statistics of past charges. When the question was asked by the Federation of Insurers, the administration said that they would not interfere with the price level of these facilities, but you said that you would like to raise price transparency so that consumers and patients will have more information. Section 63 requires historical statistics on fees and charges, and the licensee must publish these statistics. So before there is this provision, does the administration know whether that has been done, and who satisfactorily do this without an actual requirement under the law? For these facilities controlled and managed by the two universities, you said they would, but it doesn't mean that they shall. Section 63 does not cover them. I don't know whether they have been doing this and whether they have done that well. So have they done something similar under Section 63? And you can tell me, say for example, yes, they have been and it's all right. Without this section to bind them, I don't know what they will do in the future. How do we ensure that they will do it and that they will do it well? Section 63 regulates private hospitals. We do not exempt CUHK or Hong Kong U. Our requirement is that private hospitals will have to publish a list or a charge list, and a lot of them already have such lists. And under Section 63 in the future, we will require them to provide us a budget estimate. 12 of these facilities have been doing it, and we hope that all of them will. About 70% of them have given us the information. We also asked them to provide the statistics on fees and charges online, and 70% of them have done it. And under the bill, all of them will have to do it. So Section 63 still regulates as facilities or private hospitals managed and controlled by the two universities. How about non-hospitals? Let me continue. For day procedures, centers and clinics, under the bill, we only require them to provide a list of charges. For these centers and clinics, their operations are simpler. Procedures involved may not be as complex, so list of charges is sufficient to let patients know how much they have to pay roughly. Hospitals will be more complicated. We think that that is sufficient to protect consumers. Of course, we will keep in view future development to decide the way forward. At this stage, we think that we should take it step by step. According to the administration, these two universities, do they provide a list of charges? Yes, they provide charging information, and as to specifics, it may vary with the university. That means we can't regulate them. But that's primarily for teaching and research. Maybe it's difficult to set a charge. If there are exclusions, of course, they will not be regulated. However, we can still talk to the two universities. if we think that all other facilities are doing it, we can ask them to provide a list of charges as well. Second round, Mr. Shukafai, 4 minutes. Last time I asked a question and the administration and Dr. Pierre Chan said that that's
Beauty parlors. Beauty parlors.
will cover beauty parlors as well. Well, but how do you define medical procedure? Say, for example, eyebrow tattooing, anesthetic will have to be used. In paragraph 21 in the response paper dated November, it said Cap 138 does not prohibit anyone from using a certain topical anesthetic as long as this is provided for the purpose of treatment or procured from pharmacies. As you know that a lot of beauty parlors provide eyebrow tattooing services. So anesthetic cream will have to be used. And if that is the case, then it has to be done by a doctor. Then the beauty parlor will have to be a medical service establishment. Well, in relation to anesthetic cream, last time we had detailed discussion because anesthetic cream is regulated by another piece of legislation and not this one. Well, as long as the anesthetic cream is procured from a doctor, then it's something stored in a domestic setting. The administration and Dr. Pierre Chen said that it has nothing to do with the beauty services sector, but I don't agree because for beauty parlors, they will be caught under this and they will have to be sent to prison for 2 years. So you can't say that it's nothing to do with beauty parlors. We understand the concern of the beauty services sector. Well, when we regulate a trade, whether it is the beauty services as well, as long as there is a medical procedure involved, then they will have to be licensed. And if the beauty parlor provide purely beauty services without any medical service, then we can't regulate them. Can you tell us if the beauty parlor has to be licensed? It covers the medical procedure conducted by doctors, and there needs to be a separate access and not other places, right? That's right. The part that is not that does not involve medical services, it doesn't have to be licensed as long as they can be segregated. You said that it's nothing to do with it. But what is happening now in a lot of beauty parlors, that service is provided. So once this bill is passed, then these beauty parlors will all have to be turned into clinics. What do you have to... Does it mean that when you go for a tattoo, you have to go to a doctor? Well, say eyebrow tattooing or general tattooing on body, you have to apply anesthetic cream. And if that is applied, you need a doctor. So you have to exclude them as well. Well, anesthetic cream is covered by another piece of legislation. Well, let's assume that in a beauty parlor, someone wants eyebrow tattooing, there is a doctor stationed in the beauty parlor, and the local anesthetic cream is prescribed by the doctor. And then the cream is used in the beauty parlor for eyebrow tattooing. I think that is what Mr. Xu is concerned about. If in a beauty parlor, local anesthetic cream is used and which is prescribed by a doctor, can it be excluded? This is rather technical, and I will defer to the D of H.
Before I answer the question, I'd like to explain to you our understanding. Mr. Chen is saying that these medical procedures cannot be distinguished so easily, and we agree. We have already had lots of discussion on this since 2012, when the working group started was formed. We've already reviewed all the the many medical cosmetic procedures and whether they could be differentiated from medical procedures. For some, we already agree that they are procedures which must be performed by doctors. For eyebrow tattooing and so on, it involves puncturing the skin, piercing the skin, and there is the risk of infection. So if they were performed by beauticians, it would come under the definition of medical procedure. But applying local anesthesia, it's just the use of medicine to either relieve the pain or to apply anesthesia. That we're not talking about procedure here. The cream itself, under Cap 138, that is how can such medicine could be used and how obtained and how they should be used. As the chairman said, for a doctor to prescribe certain registered medicine, and if the medicine were taken home or elsewhere and the patient used them, it would not be illegal. As to who prescribed the medicine and how it's being prescribed, it's something else. So we think that tattooing the eyebrow and applying using the local anesthesia are two separate issues. Dr. Pierre Chan. Miss Elizabeth Kwok. 4 minutes. I'll let follow up further on that. I don't agree that tattooing the eyebrow or applying the local anesthesia cream are two separate issues. If you understand the beauty industry, when you sculpt the eyebrow, definitely the cream will need to be used. I understand that the ordinance governing the application of anesthesia cream does not come under the ambit of this bill, but because of incidents which happen in medical facilities, and that's why the beauty industry is very concerned. If you insist that applying anesthesia cream had nothing to do with the tattooing of the eyebrow, that doesn't really resolve the problem. The beauty industry is now very worried. That is, in future, they would need to ask doctors to do the eyebrow tattooing in the clinic of a doctor. For many beauty parlors, this is one of the major businesses. But in future, if they could only be performed by doctors in clinics, it's not acceptable. Secondly, at the last meeting with the Bureau, the beauty industry asked whether or not there must be one doctor, stationed in a beauty parlor, or could one doctor, operate more than one beauty parlors? Thank you. Regarding the application of anesthesia cream for eyebrow tattooing is not governed by this bill, but there are already other ordinances which govern that, and in certain scenarios, other ordinances may be breached. But this ordinance per se does not deal with the question of local anesthesia. So in future there will be another piece of ordinance to regulate tattoos, body tattooing, and so that's been taken care of already. But the question of local anesthesia cream will come under the ambit of another ordinance. As to whether there should, well, according to the bill, there should be a chief medical executive. He can monitor, or he can manage at least 2 ambulatory, facility. The beauty industry has told us that very often they have one doctor, operating or based in more than one beauty parlors. So we're not considering whether we can make a relaxation. When we have any proposal, we'll come back and consult the industry again. Dr. Kwok, you say you are looking into that possibility, but what we are vetting this bill at the moment. So do you think there is such a room? And before you consult the industry, how can we continue with our scrutiny of the bill? Chairman, before our next meeting, I think they should come up with a proposal. We need to agree with the industry before we can continue with our deliberation. Otherwise, we haven't come to that yet. I think we can resolve the other issues first. Mr. Tommy Zhang, I've heard this many times, Chairman. The director said that this bill cannot regulate the use of local anesthesia, anesthetic cream. I don't think you have answered the question. You say there's no way you can deal with that. Is it illegal now, according to the other ordinance, for when local anesthetic cream are being used when eyebrows are being tattooed in beauty parlors? Is that illegal? Could you answer the question again? On the subject of the anesthetic cream, it's covered under Cap 138 and registered. It is a registered pharmaceutical product. First of all, the product will need to be registered, and also there are regulations as to that requiring that they must be procured through legal channels. Either they must be dispensed by registered pharmacists in drugstores or prescribed by doctors. Last time, we explained that the purpose of local anesthesia is to apply anesthesia and to relieve pain. And the medicine could be in the form of an ointment, but it could also be in the form of, an injection. So whether or not the patient or the person receiving treatment, as to which type of medicine should be applied to relieve the pain, whether it should be ointment or by injection. We have to consider also the possible complications. Even in other countries, there have been cases where when local anesthesia was applied, there would still be serious complications, because we're talking about the use of medicine which could be absorbed by the skin. If administered improperly, there could be serious consequences resulting in palpitation or even deaths. So we believe that, according to the law, whether or not the local anesthesia cream should be applied, and which patient should be dispensed with such a cream and so on. All that will constitute a medical behavior or act. So we will need to judge each case on its merit and see whether or not in a particular case there will be a breach of the medical registration ordinance. So I think this is what we already explained in detail at the last meeting. Chairman, it's very simple. My question is, right now, before the bill becomes law, and the anesthesia cream is covered by Cap 138. So the question is very simple. If I, Tommy Zhang, goes to a beauty parlor and want to tattoo my eyebrow, if the beauty parlor uses the local anesthetic cream, would they have breached the law? And the cream is obtained legitimately. or from a pharmacist or a doctor's clinic. So as of now, if the beauty parlor sculpting my eyebrow and using the local anesthetic cream, would they already have breached the law? Because they shouldn't use any form of anesthesia, whether in the form of an ointment or injection. Dr. Chiu, for such anesthesia which are being used now, is that a problem? I think Mr. Fong already said that whether or not we enact any regulation is not relevant. Even now, for if certain acts are performed in certain premises and such acts are likely to breach the law, we will need to look at each case on its merit. As the chairman said, if the patient, obtains the medicine from a doctor and if he applied it on himself, would that be a problem? We would need to look at each case on its merit to see whether or not it breaches Cap 138. And eventually it's not for the Department of Health to determine whether or not they have breached the law. We find that there is a problem, we'll work together with the police, and if there is a possibility that someone is, providing medical service without a license or prescribing medicine without a license, we will take joint action with the police. We will give our expert advice, and then we will we'll consult the DOJ to see whether or not the law has been breached, and eventually the court will decide on the case in question. So I therefore cannot say whether any particular case is problematic. Chairman, I can queue for my second round, but I can't be brief. Well, in that case, why don't you wait for your second round? Okay, she's beating around the bush, and then we can take 2 years to scrutinize bill if they so wish. We still have a few other members waiting in turn. Dr. Pierre Chen. First of all, I have received a letter from the College of Pathology, and they asked a very clear question. That is, it's about the regulation of laboratories. Other than talking to the industry, could you tell us how you propose to deal with that? Because some of them are operated by doctors, some are not. For one of the directors is a doctor, the other directors are not. So it would appear that this part is missing. So perhaps you can answer this question at our next meeting. Secondly, I'd like to go back to your reply, and I'd like to go to Annex A. I asked for some information and papers. I asked for the telephone numbers of the person in charge of handling complaints and so on. On the handling of incidents, I think what happened, in the light of what happened recently, we found that if an incident happens under the HA, an investigation will be carried out and then the report will be published. But if the HA investigates incidents happening at the universities, the HA has no jurisdiction. But the universities has not given us a formal reply. They've only indicated through the media that they will deal with the incidents according to established mechanisms. But very often they talk about established mechanism and so on. When myself and the media pursue this further and ask what is the mechanism and when they will have a report, the answer is there is none. And thirdly, about the system, the investigation mechanism. Do we have a text or a document? The contact person, the telephone number, and the address of the person concerned, and the list of the members of the complaint handling committee. That's all I'm asking for. Dr. Chen referred to the letter from the College of Pathologists earlier.
We have talked to them. If the medical laboratory is manned by a registered medical officer or dentist, then they will still have to be licensed. That is the first point. The second point about medical chemists. There is a regulatory regime to regulate their conduct. This focuses, the current bill focuses on regulating facilities. So we don't intend to regulate other allied medical professionals, say for example, medical chemists. So we rely on their own respective board to regulate their conduct. In relation to how the two universities handle incidents, well, the FHB is very concerned about the incident. Queen of Mary published an investigation report. We asked them to implement the recommendations as soon as possible. The Hong Kong U, having received the investigation report, well, because the incident involved the Human Resources Department, well, there is Human Resources procedure triggered. They will deal with the incident according to procedure. Of course, priority is given to patient safety, welfare, as well as welfare of the public. So there is a mechanism to deal with these cases. We will have to wait for the result. When this bill is passed, there will be regulation in this regard. We're talking about private hospitals under the two universities. We regulate them because this is about major medical incidents, so we have regulatory power. Just a quick word. The Hong Kong College of Pathologists, can you give me a reply in writing? You mentioned about complaints handled by the human resources of universities. Well, there are incidents once every several years. Well, if the doctor does not agree with the result, is there an appeal mechanism? Can you provide me contact information, name, telephone number, address? Next, Miss Elizabeth Quat. I want to declare interest. My family member is engaged in beauty services business, so I want to declare interest. Mr. Tommy Joe. I don't feel good about Dr. Chiu's question. You can ask her to answer again. I've asked a number of questions. The first part was answered. Well, this bill has nothing to do with the use of a topical anesthetic cream or anesthetic by injection in relation to eyebrow tattooing. But you can tell me that you won't answer or you don't know. So, in a beauty parlor, the use of a topical anesthetic cream. Just now, Dr. Chiu has wasted my time going round and round, beating round and round the bush. And I was saying that, well, I want to have eyebrow tattooing to make them nicer. So I'm thinking about it. You talk about 161 and 138. So, in a beauty parlor, where the topical anesthetic cream is procured legitimately, and when there is a medical incident where topical anesthetic cream is used, albeit that it was procured legitimately, and the person, say Tommy Zhang, suffered shock and other problems. So can Tommy Zhang go take the case to the court? As my two other members said, this is rather common. Can you answer me? So someone will break the law if something happens. Otherwise, it's all right. So, well, this committee is about private healthcare facilities. I know. So I'm perfectly happy with answers such as I refuse to answer or I don't know. Let's see if the administration can answer the question. We'll try to answer questions as far as possible. We do think that these questions will have to be addressed. Well, in relation to CAP 138 and 161, the use of topical anesthetic cream in beauty parlors may be against the law. One of those categories is the procurement of the cream. When we look at the case, so there is a chance that the beauty parlor has contravened CAP 161. That is, in relation to the use of topical anesthetic cream. Currently, there are two pieces of legislation regulating the procurement of such cream and the application of the cream. So, when this bill is introduced, it gives rise to other problems. Of course, we have to look into the specific case before we can decide whether it's against the law. But all we can say is that there is a chance it may be against the law. So, if you have eyebrow tattooing in a beauty parlor, there is a chance. No, what about the past? Has there been any convictions or prosecutions? The DFH provided us with information. Well, it's mainly about the provenance of the topical anesthetic cream. So it's about CAP 138, the purchase. So if a doctor prescribed the anesthetic cream or give a prescription to do it instead of someone going somewhere to buy in bulk, you say that because it's about provenance, so CAP 138 is involved. But what about the application of topical anesthetic cream? It may contravene CAP 161 because it is a medical procedure. You talk about a conviction. So was it an offense under 138 or 161? We're aware of a case involving 138, but we have to look whether there are any with 161. I understand 138 is nothing to do with us. So if it's 138, then they have to be very careful, because you have to be very careful with the purchase of this cream. You can't just buy it anywhere. If it's about 161, that means the application should not be done, whether it is anesthetic administered by injection or in the form of ointment, because the application of the cream or the injection will have to be done in the presence of a medical doctor. That means eyebrow tattooing will be much more expensive in the future. So please check whether there are any convictions under 161. Mr. Shiu Ka-fai. Just the same question. It may have nothing to do with it, but you can't help but think that it's involved, is relevant. I don't want to make things difficult for you. If you want to better regulate establishments, of course, that is in line with public aspiration. But if you don't clarify where the line is drawn, then people will continue to pester me and I will continue to pester you. I spend a lot of time on this. Well, Dr. Chen is here too. They said that it's nothing to do with beauty services. I sent a letter. You still can't clearly clarify what is a medical procedure. Well, beauticians would not want to have anything to do with it. But they are concerned that beauty parlors might one day become a clinic or a medical service establishment. Can you give us an answer to dispel the fear of beauty parlors? Mr. Fong. This is a difficult question. We understand to a certain extent the operation of beauty parlors. This bill, however, deals with when beauty parlors conduct medical procedures or medical services, because there needs to be regulation. So if they are involved in medical procedure, then they will be regulated because they want to regulate establishments where medical procedures are conducted, whether it's a beauty parlor, whether it's the beauty services sector or not, because that happens. If they need a doctor to conduct these procedures, then they will be regulated. But if they don't engage in medical services, say it's just facial or massages, then it's fine. So we look at their operation to see if any medical services or procedure is involved, especially a medical procedure under Schedule 2. We have to be extra careful because it carries higher risk. That is where the problem lies. Of course, if it involves something surgical, then there is no doubt. But what about, say, eyebrow tattooing? Is it a medical service? The administration said that the process of eyebrow tattooing is not, but if certain thing is used, then it will be. How can you have eyebrow tattooing without topical anesthetic cream? Well, you say that you will exclude eyebrow tattooing, but if you use an anesthetic cream, then a doctor has to be present. And if the doctor is present, then it will fall under this bill and you will have to renovate your place. You say it's not relevant, but I beg to differ. Perhaps after the meeting, perhaps Mr. Fong, you can get together with Mr. Shiu and Miss Quat, because we have spent a lot of time to talk about this. Maybe you can approach the two members. I will attend as well. You'll have a proper discussion so that you can better understand their concern. Well, they have raised an issue that may not be related to this bill, but this bill gives rise to their concern.
If we do not have clear answer to those questions, I don't think this committee would be able to move forward. Mr. Tommy Jung and Ms. Alice Mack, if other members are interested, we can all sit together, and after the meeting we can, try to explore this further. Ms. Alice Mack, first round. Chairman, you talk about eyebrow tattooing. I've done that myself. When it was done, I didn't know anything about the local anesthesia cream and that it was not allowed. As a consumer, in deciding to go to which beauty parlor to tattoo the eyebrow, you're just concerned about whether or not about the skill of the beautician. You would never have imagined that the local anesthesia applied is the application itself is a medical treatment or procedure. So this shows that the government, I think, it's not doing an adequate job in terms of regulation of the beauty industry and public education. I think there is a need here. Whether it's Mr. Fong, I don't know who should be responsible. Anyway, the Bureau, I think, should do this, and that is they should do a better job in terms of regulating the beauty industry. And I think the industry minds if you come up with rules so that they can, be more professional. Right now, the rules are not clear. They're worried that they will be caught. Today, we talk about, eyebrow tattooing. What about, they could come up with another procedure, and the new equipment may appear tomorrow. The beauty parlors would use them, and then it could be, some would say that it's a medical procedure. The consumers may not know, and the beautician may use another medicine in the course of the treatment. So I think this should be the responsibility of the Department of Health. It may not be Mr. Fong's. At least the Department of Health should. I think it's not the first time that you realize that when the eyebrows are being tattooed, local anesthesia is applied. Why is it that when we bring this up in the deliberating this bill, you are telling us that it's not covered by the present bill, and why should we bring this up? And we've already told you so 2 meetings back. But the Department of Health has never, done any public education, giving us, clear definitions and rules. So I think the Bureau and the Department have a responsibility here. In the course of the consultation, Mr. Fong and Mr. Xin, who has now left the post, I remember I've told you that you must consult the beauty industry because they don't know whether they will be caught. And you said, never mind, it has nothing to do with them because you're talking about medical, facilities or premises. And that's why you have this scenario, problem now. You're just focusing on medical procedures. But have you noticed that other things are happening in society at the same time? Other industries, including the beauty industry, may be affected. So you may say what we are asking is not relevant, but I think you must understand about the concerns of the beauty industry. At least you should tell them clearly. I mean, right now they're just in the dark. Today we talk about eyebrow tattooing. We don't know what we'll be talking about tomorrow. Everybody is worried that they will be caught into the trap. Director, I understand members' concern, and I think she raised a very good point. And it's because of that since I took up the position, I already met with the beauty industry at least 3 or 4 times. We think there's a need to meet with them, and we will continue to liaise with them to clarify the issues and to find out what will be the impact. We'll continue to do that. Other than consultation, I think you need to conduct public education for the industry. The law says that now if you ask the relevant industries, recently I consulted a medical, a beauty, parlor institution, and they were not aware of the ordinance which affect them. While we are still scrutinizing the bill, there are certain things that we can amend yet. But what we are most worried about is that when we go to the council and it's reported, and then only then will they realize that the company will need to be licensed and they need to actually fit out the premises again. So don't think that you are just regulating the medical facilities or ambulatory medical procedure centers, but there are such organizations in the market. You need to promote this so that they understand. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be licensed. If they conduct in medical procedures which are performed by doctors, they should be licensed. They should follow the rules, but they need to know. I'm worried that many people right now don't know that is relevant to them. Dr. Pierre Chan. Many members are concerned about the beauty industry. I hope the government will take heed of that. Perhaps you can consider, working with the university, and perhaps you can work out with an exemption for eyebrow tattooing. I don't understand the government's logic here, however, and this is because most of the government told us many things will be subject to regulation. The government will be regulating the hospitals and the universities and the hospitals managed by the universities. But the premises of the universities will not be regulated. The answer is that because these premises are only used for teaching and research purposes. But the university hospitals are mainly used for teaching and research purposes. We've heard of major operations like liver transplant. All the operation procedures which are being done are for teaching and research purposes. Should these be exempted as well? So that's the first point. In Annex B of your paper, for the so-called scanning centers, you have, for example, the doctors in public hospitals will refer patients to private institutions to do the scanning. In Queen Mary Hospital, there is a premises where a private service is being offered, and it's not for teaching or research purposes. So the question is this: you told us that obviously, well, this is obviously a privately operated, facility to offer scanning purposes. How can you convince us that it's mainly for teaching or research purposes? And you say that patients have signed a consent. Please give us some examples. Give us a paper to convince us. Mr. Fong. To answer Dr. Chen's first question, that I was, twitching my eyebrow. I'm sorry, I'm not able to control my eyebrow. I think we must clarify this. For the two teaching hospitals, QMH and Prince of Wales Hospital, they will not be regulated by the bill because both teaching hospitals are jointly, it's a premises where there is joint collaboration between HA and the universities. But the private hospitals, including the Chinese University Hospital, will be regulated by the bill. And that private hospital will not be used mainly for teaching or research purposes. So we are applying the same principle. And the logic here is very clear. If it is mainly used for teaching or research, and the two medical faculties and the teaching hospitals are exempted. Referring to the first and second item in Annex B, the PET and CT unit, we can certainly try to obtain some templates from the universities. Well, this is why we have such a strong reaction. The government and the universities has come up with a proposal that you will exempt some of the university facilities or premises. Some members are concerned. For example, when we talk about beauty services, eyebrow tattooing, other than members, even the Consumer Council is concerned about the regulation of the beauty industry. And it's not just members who are concerned. I hope the government will understand. I understand you're under a lot of pressure, and thank you. I don't have anything further to add. Ms. Kwok. Thank you. I'd like to reiterate again as to why we're so concerned about the beauty industry and how they will be affected by this bill. Although you are saying that there is little impact, you say that this is already the current situation. But for many beauty parlors, it's not like that. Mr. Siu Kai Fai already pointed out the difficulty or the problem that we're now facing. Although you are saying that there are already rules saying that if the beauty parlors use local anesthetic cream, they would already be breaching 138 or 161, Cap 138, 161. Just this point alone would be shocking news for the beauty institutions. Some beauticians told us that they've been performing eyebrow tattooing for 40 years. They've been using the cream anesthetic for 40 years until some of the peers have been arrested. They realize that it's not legal. The whole industry is hiring many beauticians, and many of them have used the anesthetic cream in the course of tattooing eyebrows. They've never imagined that it's illegal. We have many laws and regulations which are outdated. For example, using local anesthesia, when we have eyebrow tattooing or body tattooing, I think the regulation is outdated. I think perhaps we can. So does it mean that the patient, that the consumer who wants a service should obtain the anesthesia from doctors? So when you consider how you can address this issue, this bill, according to this bill, if somebody applies the local anesthesia, this can only be done under the supervision of a doctor, and then the beauty parlor would need to operate a clinic and engage a doctor, and they wouldn't be able to survive. So in future, the whole industry will not survive. Only the listed, the chain beauty parlors owned by large consortium can survive and afford to hire, a resident doctors. The smaller ones will simply not be able to survive. But most of the beauty parlors are SMEs. They provide a lot of employment. Many ladies, many women work as petitions to support the family. So many people will be affected. So to say that this bill is not relevant to them is not right, because there is indeed a relevance here, and they will be affected. And they are now very worried because of the uncertainty. So why is it that so that's why you cannot just look at this bill in isolation. You have to also consider this in conjunction with other ordinances. Otherwise, the beauty industry will think that it will not be able to survive because you're not able to exhaust each and every case, and you cannot give clear answers to the question. So you cannot convince the beauty industry that this bill will not affect them at all. So we therefore need to consider this in more detail. Otherwise, after we've enacted this legislation, you're forcing many people to breach the law, and it's not reasonable. The chairman proposed that we have a meeting. After the meeting, I'll be willing to take part. Hopefully, we'll be able to find a solution. Okay, I'll go for my next round then. You may continue. regarding exempting the two universities from regulation. Having read the papers and hearing your answer to Dr. Chen's question, I still don't understand your rationale.
學嘅教學
They may be facilities under universities for teaching and research, but I believe that there are clinical procedures or treatment there. If that is the case, how come they are exempted? Because from paper, I can't see any justification why these facilities are excluded. First of all, the bill does not regulate hospitals, clinics under the hospital authority. What is the justification? Because there is another piece of legislation under the of the HA to regulate them, so there is no need to duplicate. So that is the equivalent to this. No, the hospital authority ordinance is there to enable the establishment of the HA. Well, it sets out here that is HA, universities, and how it compares with the regulation of this bill on private facilities is in Annex A. Now, how come universities are not regulated? The medical schools of the two universities will not be regulated. That they are the Queen of Mary Hospital and the Prince of Wales Hospital. Private hospitals managed and controlled by universities that are not for teaching and research purpose will be regulated. That's how we deal with it. We think that under the mechanism of teaching and research, there is already regulatory regime in place that are similar to the one in this bill. The regulatory approach may be slightly different between that of universities and that of this bill. However, the same objectives are met. If we cover them as well, then it is not the best way to use resources. However, we have to make it clear that if these facilities are not for teaching or research, say for example other clinics of universities, then they will not be excluded. Other facilities of the two universities are not excluded. So 14 of them as well as some others. So we use teaching and research as the line. If in the future we see that these establishments are not primarily used for teaching and research, the DOH may require them to apply for a license. Ms. Ann Chang, speaking for the first time. I was going to follow up on HA hospitals and universities and the fact that they are excluded. I heard from Chairman that you mentioned Annex A. I don't see it. Well, let me find it first and I will ask questions later. Yes, it's in the administration's response paper, Annex A. So, HA facilities under the private hospitals under the HA, are they regulated? Private hospitals under the HA? Well, private hospitals in the private sectors, any of them under the purview of the hospital authority? private hospitals are covered under Cap 165, under the purview of the Department of Health. So not the HA. No, the hospital authority is solely responsible for public hospitals. So HA is responsible for public hospitals, and public hospitals will be covered under the Hospital Authority Ordinance. Private hospitals will be covered by this bill, right? Oh, now I understand. Dr. Pierre Chan, I'd like to follow up on this. Is the administration's paper CB bracket 2824/1617 bracket 01 for small-scale clinic. One single person may operate 2 or 3 of these small clinics. Say, for example, a dentist, 3 of them working together, and they will go to clinics, one in New Territories, one in Kowloon, one on Hong Kong Island, working different times. If one person owns 3 of these small practice clinics, dental ones, so by small practice clinics, what is the definition? Where do you draw the line? A lot of dentists runs a number of clinics or premises with several dentists working together, working different hours at different locations. So can you tell me the definition of small practice clinics? Mr. Fong? Small practice clinics. If an exemption is to be applied from the Department of Health, then is maximum of 5 doctors or dentists practicing at these clinics, and they are also directors of these clinics, maximum of 5. If the doctor or the dentist owns several clinics, then the other clinic will have to apply for a similar exemption. Well, let me give you an example. One in Kowloon, one on Hong Kong Island, one in New Territories, and each of them will have 5 dentists, and one person runs these 3 clinics. So these clinics will be exempted? Well, as long as the 5 dentists or doctors are directors of the 3 clinics. So long as they employ one person, then they can't get an exemption. Sorry, I have to go into detail. Say 5 doctors or dentists in the Kowloon clinic, they are all directors. And in the NT1, only 4 of them are directors. 1 of them is employed. Then that one cannot be exempted under small practice clinics. So where can I find the information that you've just given me? It's about actual operation. Dentists or doctors don't even know themselves. I think you'll have to wait till clause by clause. 41, okay. And I want to ask, so one person maximum by operate, meaning in the capacity of directors, 3. And each clinic has 5. Is that right? I'll defer to Mr. Lee. Thank you. Mr. Michael Lee. The exemption under small practice clinics requires the operator to apply from the DOH and a letter of exemption. You will find details in section 41. The small practice clinic will have less than 5 doctors or dentists, and all of them will have to be operators, and only these 5 will practice in there. Then the clinic can fulfill the definition of small practice clinic. And as to the number of small practice clinics run by each dentist or doctor, the number is 3. It can be a partnership as long as each clinic fulfills the definition of small practice clinics. Then every doctor or dentist can run 3 of those. There are 2 other members who would like to ask questions. If there are no others, I will go into clause by clause. We can continue to discuss questions raised today. When it comes to beauty services, we will discuss them after the meeting. If you are going to repeat the same questions, perhaps we will wait till later. I will ask the legal advisor to talk about the letter sent with questions. Second round, Ms. Ann Chang, and speaking for the 4th time, Mr. Shiu Ka-fai. Ms. Chang. I still have one question. I've been concerned about this since day 1, and my concern is not allayed. I asked the administration to consider this further. That is, to protect public safety and to address the issue of compensation. Say, public hospital. Should something happen, there may be reconciliation between the HA and patients. There may be compensation made. Patients get some kind of protection. Some private hospitals, some of them are quite sizable. It's a whole building, so they will be able to reconciliate or make compensation. There are some clinics, private ones, say Dr. Pierre Chan's clinic, Dr. Chen Tai-man's clinic, and should something happens, the person will lose their reputation. Well, they take out insurance, paying a very high premium. Under this bill, it's no longer the case that a clinic is run under the doctor's name. It can be a clinic called whatever name they want, say Happy Clinic. They need to employ a chief medical executive to run the clinic, and it can be a non-medical officer, or the investors can be all laymen. The running of the clinic is the chief medical executive, which is an individual. So would you consider requiring these clinics to take out insufficient insurance for these chief medical executive.
Thank you. I'd like to clarify the point regarding responsibility. Under this bill, if the clinic, in the course of its operation, cannot satisfy the requirements of the Department of Health, the onus or the responsibility fell onto the licensee. But the licensee will satisfy the requirements of the department through the chief medical executive. So the responsibility falls onto the shoulder of the licensee, but we require that he be a doctor. So we hope that he can satisfy all the medical requirements. But if the chief medical executive were to breach certain professional conduct or codes of ethics, then they will be regulated subject to the medical practitioner's ordinance. So we deal with that in that manner. Well, that is exactly my concern, Chairman. The license holder, according to your paper, is allowed to hold the clinic in the form of a limited company. And it could be, a company with a registered capital of only $10,000. That's all the capital that the company has, and the patient, in the event of an incident, will not be able to claim anything. Well, when we go into details like that, this has to do with the company's ordinance. Namely, well, the question is whether the director of the limited company, being the license holder, the question is whether or not he has to shoulder the liability regarding civil claims or liabilities. That is not something that can be handled by this bill. It comes under the ambit of another ordinance. Chairman, I'm sorry, I beg to differ, because the company's ordinance have requirements regarding company registration. But this bill allows the operator to register as a limited company. So if the facility is registered as a limited company, shouldn't you require the licensee to be a physical person? That is, Ann Chang invest in the operation of a clinic, then I must register myself, Ann Chang, as a licensee, so that if anything happens, I could be, sued. Of course, there are cases where you will prosecute against the license holder, namely ABC Company Limited, and their major directors or shareholders. There have been such cases, but still, according to the law, I understand that sometimes it's not so easy to prosecute the shareholders, because it is a limited company holding the facility, and you will not be able to go after the real owner. Well, just in case an incident happens, the patient will have nobody to go after for compensation. There are many such examples, Mr. Fong. When it comes to details like that, of course, we're talking about civil litigation. And Dr. Cheng is right. In some cases, the directors and shareholders will be held liable. So there are already relevant ordinances to deal with that scenario. So my question is whether the licensee should be, you require that the licensee should be a physical person. I think we should retain the flexibility. If we require the private hospital, the license holder of a private hospital to be a physical person, this might be difficult. Of course, naturally, the shareholders of the private company, shareholders will need to bear the responsibility. Should there be complaints against private hospitals or the ambulatory medical, procedure facilities, if they fail to satisfy the requirements of the ordinance or the Department of Health, we can revoke its license. And that, so So they will need to bear that in mind. I think we have one more member yet to ask question. Chairman, I just want to I just want the administration to seek some legal advice here, because I understand that there are requirements in the law. Let's say if I operate the bank could be held by a limited company, but there are certain requirements in terms of minimum capital, requirement and so on. Could we ask them to explore whether you can provide for similar arrangements in the bill to offer, so that there could be more safeguards to protect the interests of the public? Why don't we ask them to find out first before they give us an answer? Mr. Wong Ting Kwong and Mr. Shiu Ka Fai. Mr. Wong, I'll give you 4 minutes and 2 minutes for Mr. Shiu, because it's almost time. Thank you. The law is not that simple because society is getting more and more complex. The bill involves commercial behavior and professional behavior. So my question is this. Let's say a certain consortium or certain person or individual invest into the medical industry or profession, or certain charitable organization. A certain organization operates, a medical facility, providing medical services, and it hires doctors, and these doctors work within that medical facility. These doctors are not shareholders, they're not directors. They're not proprietors, they're just employees. And these doctors could be employed for a week, a month, a year, or even permanently. If it is for 1 month, like you said, there can only be a maximum of 5 doctors in the premises. Could we have 5 doctors at any time, but there could be a pool of doctors rotating to take turns? Also, have you considered whether medical vehicles as medical facilities? Some charitable organizations run medical vehicles or mobile clinics. I mean, they could be outdoors. They could operate outdoors, and they are privately run. So have you considered that scenario, Mr. Fong? Regarding the small practice clinic, the bill stipulates that there could be a maximum of 5 doctors or dentists practicing in that clinic, and they are also the operators and directors. They have to be the same 5 persons. If there is a change in the, they should inform us. Well, I don't think you're being realistic here, because that may not be so. Many charitable organizations are the bona fide owner of the facility, and the doctors there are only employees. And these doctors, whether they are employees or whether they're volunteers, or they could be simply paid an honoraria. So so could you find out? Have you talked to these organizations, Mr. Fong? I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. If the doctor were an employee, then then the facility would need to be licensed. There is no exemption. We've talked to some NGOs about this. Well, in that case, I'm worried that this stifle the medical services offered by the NGOs. for these medical facilities, they are already regulated by CAP 303. It's nothing new. We're just placing them under the ambit of the new ordinance. Next, what about mobile medical facilities? If doctors and dentists are practicing there, it would be regarded as a facility. I think it's almost time I'll allow 2 minutes for Mr. Siu. Thank you. In recent years, hospitals have been complaining that they don't have enough doctors. So for the medical facilities, you say that the facilities would need to be, manned by doctors. According to your estimate, how many doctors would be required to man these facilities? Now, we are requiring that a chief medical executive, if he manages 2 clinics or one, he's already a doctor himself, he needs to be registered. And secondly, if the clinic were operated by a consortium and the consortium operate more than 3, and he doesn't, and they would set up some MAC, a medical advisory committee, and of course it's likely that there could be one more. So, doctor, but they can use the same doctors. Because doctors need to, provide service there. Otherwise, he cannot be the chief medical executive. So there's no need for them to appoint additional doctors. So as a result, there will not be any demand for additional doctors. For the beauty parlors, normally they would invite individual doctors to help give Botox injection. They're not based there full time. And the doctors may only take 1 or 2 hours to give the injections, and the same doctor may go to different clinics to give injections. So with the passage of this bill, will such a doctor be affected? You say the doctor must be resident in the clinic. Can that doctor go to different clinics performing service? Yes, we don't regulate that. We only require the license holder to ensure that there would be a chief medical executive to oversee the operation of the clinic. And this executive can only oversee or manage a maximum of 2 clinics. As to how many clinics a doctor can go to provide service, there is no restriction. So the doctor may only come once a week and spare 2 hours to give the injection. And they don't need the doctor to register as the chief medical executive. With the enactment of this bill, then this doctor will need to be registered as resident of that clinic. Mr. Speaker, I think time is almost up. Perhaps we can, deliberate further on the subject of beauty parlors at the meeting that we hold after the meeting. We need to hand over the venue today at 10:30. Our next meeting will be held on 13th of February at 10:45. I think basically we've almost asked all the questions we need to ask. Next time, other than giving answers to the questions raised today, I hope we'll be able to go into the clause by clause. And any further questions can be dealt with during the clause by clause. With that, we're now adjourned.